Let's bring in former ambassador to the United Nations and Fox News contributor, Ambassador John Bolton. We were talking just seconds before the president made his comments. One of the things that popped, and it's something we've heard the president say before, quote, "Our children should inherit our love and not our conflicts." Your reaction to the president's speech?
Well, I thought it was right on target. I think he made the clear point that this moving the embassy to Jerusalem makes sense for both the United States and Israel. And he addressed some of the arguments that have been made over the past 20-plus years about why we shouldn't do this. For example, the question that would a move of our embassy affect the final status negotiations over Jerusalem? And he said, no, absolutely not. And, you know, there's never been any contemplation that the American embassy would be in East Jerusalem, claimed by the Palestinians. It was always intended to be in West Jerusalem, and I'm sure that's where it will end up. And he also said that while people are going to disagree with it, we're not going to be intimidated and everybody to react peacefully to it, whether they agree with it or not. But I think the most important point is, you know, a lot of people, including members of Congress who say they want to move the embassy, have been saying, we want to do it just not now. Right. And sometimes in diplomacy, not now means not ever. I think the president made it pretty clear. He was specific about engineers and architects and planners getting started. So as we were discussing earlier, now the focus is on the State Department, the Overseas Buildings Office, to get moving, find a site, and get it under construction.
Yeah, you know, what you're bringing up is the point that the president made, and I'm going to quote him. In 1995, Congress adopted the Jerusalem Embassy Act, urging the federal government to relocate the American embassy to Jerusalem. I'll then tick down to where he says this act passed Congress by an overwhelming bipartisan majority and was reaffirmed by a unanimous vote of the Senate just 6 months ago. So to say that they have the will to do it on Capitol Hill, I guess you can look at the voting, but the proof is in the pudding. It hasn't been moved. I do want to say this for people who know this detail, Ambassador. The president will continue to sign every 6 months that waiver that keeps the embassy in Tel Aviv, because you have to keep that place funded. I want to put a fine point on that because the president did it 6 months ago and he got a lot of criticism then. This, in a way, is an answer back saying we can do both things. We can fund one and move.
Yeah, well, he didn't want State Department funding cut off, but I think it raises an interesting point for Congress. They've now got the basic foundation for the move, namely that we have finally found the capital of Israel. It turns out it's in Jerusalem. So Congress could modify the statute and put benchmarks in for State Department performance. Let's be clear, large chunks of the State Department bureaucracy do not agree with this decision. They reflect what European foreign ministries are saying. Congress and the White House need to stay on top of this, because otherwise it could get lost in the bureaucracy. Years from now, they'd still be doing site selection work. I think the president's clear he wants to move faster. I think couldn't hurt for Congress to be there along with him on it.
One quick final question for you, and it has to kind of do with the umbrella look at the president's. What we like to ask him about, you know, is this the Trump doctrine? I think every president gets asked that. But what's important here is that part of that doctrine, I'm curious to get your point on this, has to do with change, where things were just stubbornly stuck in place. You've talked with me about what we're doing with regard to North Korea and how we can't have a 26th year of doing what we've done previously in the 25 before it with regard to leadership in North Korea and nuclearization. So as you look at that and you look at this, what do you think about that doctrine?
Well, I think there's a lot to be said for the notion that Trump came in with a fresh set of eyes. He wasn't overwhelmed with the panoply of diplomacy and tradition, and he's willing to look at things from square one. I think he's done that in a number of areas. This move of the embassy to Jerusalem is one of them, and it fits with something I think it's important to him overall in his presidency, that what he said in the campaign he's going to do. And in Washington, that's another pretty revolutionary thought.
Absolutely.